And Ryan Wilson, CBSSports.com, one of the Pick Six podcast super friends, joins us because Ryan was on the tour. So I'm sure that was a blast. You need T-shirts with each stop on the back. So let's start in Tuscaloosa. Bryce Young didn't throw at the Combine, but I know he threw, and he threw impressively at Alabama's Pro Day. What's your takeaway from Bryce Young?
He is exactly who we thought he was in the fall, Adam. And yeah, he didn't get weighed in Tuscaloosa, probably because he doesn't weigh 204 pounds anymore. He didn't want to chug 10 gallons of water and get on the scales again. He didn't run at any point. I don't think CJ did. I don't think Will Levis did. At this point, we don't care, apparently, whether he's running, whether these quarterbacks can run 4.5s or not. And plenty athletic. And what you saw in person, again, confirm what you saw on Saturdays when you watched him play. But his arm is as good as CJ's, and his ability to layer the ball to all three levels stuck out to me. And CJ does that really well also. But I think, again, Bryce is so incredibly tiny. I do with the First Pick podcast with Rick Spielman, and Rick talked to Bryce after the workout on CBS Sports HQ, and both times Bryce came over and shook my hand and said, thank you or whatever. I think he's just been trained to be nice to everyone.
Sure.
And he is my size. And he is my weight, and I am not an NFL quarterback material by any standard physically. And I think you have to be able to get over that, Adam, as an evaluator, as a GM who might have traded up to the number one overall pick to sell yourself on him physically. But everything else, it checks the boxes. And I say it all the time. If he were 6'2", 220, we'd be talking about like we talked about Trevor Lawrence.
If he were – look, I actually think if he were 6'1" and 195 pounds – then the Panthers wouldn't have made the trade because the Bears would have kept the pick. If they would have kept the pick if Bryce Young were 3 inches taller, I believe. But I don't want to completely overlook the subtle flex you made by basically saying that you are in the shape of a 22-year-old kid. Ryan Wilson, CBSSports.com. You said you were the same height and weight.
I'm 5'10".
5'10". Same weight. All right. Here. How it's got to be all tape though, doesn't it? How much of what we see in the Combine and these preconceived notions about what a quarterback is supposed to look like, how much of that will really make us ignore what we have seen on film from Bryce Young for 2 years, which is exactly the way the NFL needs its quarterbacks to play now. Big moments, out of the pocket, improvising, because I think that's what he does best.
Yeah, and I think the NFL is coming around, and it's not just Bryce. Obviously, Russ Wilson was drafted in the 3rd round back in 2012. If he comes out this year, he's a first-round pick. Baker was short. Lamar Jackson was short-ish by NFL standards. Kyler was 5'10" and change, and he's been okay at times, flashes greatness, and then all the other stuff and dealing with Cliff Kingsbury and the Cardinals. That's another conversation. But I think there's a precedent. So it's not like Bryce Young is the first guy ever. Drew Brees was actually 6'1" when he came out in 2001, whatever that was. So he's actually pretty tall by the guys we're talking about standard-wise. But I think, look, I think if Frank Reich and Jim Caldwell and Josh McCown and Thomas Brown are all in on Bryce, they're going to draft Bryce because, as you point out, Adam, you can see how good he is, whether it was in the fall in Alabama on that SEC schedule. And we had Will Anderson tell us this at the Combine when we spoke to him. He said every single Saturday, Bryce Young lined up against SEC defensive tackle talent, and he took a ton of hits. And those guys a lot of those guys going to be in the NFL. And he bounced up every single time. The shoulder injury was just a freak accident when he tried to stretch for a first down, I believe, near the sidelines. So I don't think the physical part is as big a deal as perhaps we're portraying it. But again, I think we have 32 days until the draft, and we got to talk about something. So we're going to talk about why he's so small and can still do all the amazing things that we've seen him do.
All right, so how do you assess what you saw from C.J. Stroud in Columbus?
Great workout. Again, and you have to temper it, and you sort of hinted at it, Adam. You're throwing against air. You're wearing shorts, throwing to guys you know. And in C.J. Stroud's case, he was throwing to Jackson Smith-Njigba, who looked great, and some guy named Marvin Harrison Jr., who was out there just catching passes for fun.
Right.
And when I tell you that people were visibly gasping at some of the things that Marvin Harrison Jr. was doing, I'm not exaggerating. He is going to be special. And it was good to see his dad there, Marvin Harrison, who looked like a like a middle-aged man. You never would have known he's a Hall of Famer, especially standing next to his son. But CJ looked really good. Yeah. And again, he does a lot of the things that Bryce does pro day wise. He's got a good arm. He layers the throws really well. He moves well laterally. We saw glimpses of that in that Georgia game at the end of what ended up being the end of his college career. And he throws well off platform. Now, and Dennis mentioned this to me coming in, and it's the same thought I had. And it sounds like you think that CJ is just a guy on some level, and I thought the exact same thing during the fall. And I talked to CJ at the Super Bowl, We talked to him at the Combine, and the more you talk to him, the more you get a glimpse at this dude. He's serious. He's serious about being a leader. He's serious about this job, and he has people that follow him in that locker room. And I think that we perhaps undersold him because he was thrown to a bunch of first-round picks. I don't know. I mean, you can't fix that. Mm-hmm. You can't make him throw to guys who are terrible. But he had a lot of success doing that. So I think that's the reason, and given the fact that he's 6'3" and 215 or 220, whatever he is, that makes it a little easier pill to swallow if you're trying to sell to the fan base, this is our future franchise quarterback. Ryan
Wilson, CBSSports.com, with the First Pick podcast as well, kind of a part of the Pick Six podcast family. I have no idea how it's umbrellaed. I do think he's a good prospect, C.J. Stroud, from what I have seen, and I have never seen him in person, and I obviously didn't watch the pro day, but when I've seen him play, I see a guy who's, I think, a good quarterback. But I think Bryce Young, if he were taller, then we would be talking about him the way we talked about Trevor Lawrence coming out. That's he's only height away from being that guy because of everything, the poise with which he plays. And just to get back to C.J. Stroud, if he were close to Young's ability, this would be a no-brainer, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. That's all exactly right. And the other thing that we forget this time of year because it's convenient, but these first-round quarterbacks, I think the hit rate's about 25% that you're going to get a guy that you can rely on, and that means 3 out of 4 of these guys are not going to work out. So, you do the math. There's going to be 4 guys that probably go top 10, maybe top 15 after another pro day workout last week. And, one of those guys is going to work. And if you had to put money down, it feels like Bryce would be the safe bet. I think CJ is a good football player. When you're projecting him to the next level, he was a really good football player at Ohio State, but he doesn't have all the intangibles that Bryce has, and that's no disrespect to CJ because, like I said, he is really a good football player, but Bryce takes it to another level. And Rick Spielman, my co-host, says it's a lot. He's been saying this since the fall, and it's sort of weird, but when you think about it, it makes sense. He compares Bryce to Steph Curry in terms of things he's able to do. Steph Curry doesn't walk out there looking like LeBron or Michael Jordan physically, but we know what Steph Curry can do. And in terms of quarterback/point guard, running an offense, that's what Bryce brings, and it's a different level from the other quarterbacks in this class.
I don't want to completely ignore the fact that Will Levis also had a pro day. What were your thoughts? I can't imagine the Panthers have traded up to number 1 to get Will Levis, but what did you see from Will?
He can throw the football through a wall. I mean, his arm pops, and the ball whistles when he's throwing, and he's putting a little juice on it. He didn't layer it quite as well to all 3 levels. The touch passes weren't quite as crisp as CJ's and Bryce's. And again, to pro day, he used to run to guys that were freshmen last season, and those guys struggled. He wasn't throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
He wasn't throwing to Jackson Smith and Jigba. And something that Spielman noted to me, and I saw it once he mentioned it, when Will Levis rolls to his left, he struggles to throw the ball down the field with accuracy. He can still, whip it in there, but the accuracy was a concern going left, and he was extremely rocked up from the waist up. He looked like Luke Kuechly, waist up, and that's a problem when you're trying to. We talk about Tom Brady and his pliability, and we joke about it, but you don't want to be muscle bound and trying to make throws, and the flexibility is lost, and that sort of showed up as well. I do wonder what would have happened if Will Levis's pro day had been first, and then we'd seen CJ and Bryce, if that would have changed our perspective just because we're human.
Sure.
But I thought it was a good pro day, but it didn't change my mind, and it just sort of confirmed to me that I don't think you can take him first overall and feel great about your prospects compared to CJ or Bryce.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what Anthony Richardson looks like at his pro day. Final thing for you, and I'm going to ask you to answer for you and for Rick. Who do you have as the number 1 quarterback on your board? I think I saw this on your latest mock draft anyway. And who does Rick think is the best quarterback?
Yeah, Rick and I are in agreement on this. Bryce is 1, CJ's 1A. And then for me, it's Anthony Richardson. And then Will Levis, we'll see. We'll be at Anthony Richardson's Pro Day on Thursday, so we'll see him up close and personal as well. And I'm not sure where Rick is on Levis and Richardson. I think he likes Levis a little better just because there's less volatility of what he might look like with a little more experience, obviously. But for me, it's Bryce. It hasn't changed since the fall. It's Bryce and CJ, and then Richardson, and then Levis.
Ryan Wilson, CBSSports.com. You're the man. I appreciate your time. I thank you so much, and I will check in again, I don't know, down the road soon, hopefully. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Adam.
You got it. Ryan Wilson, Dynamite. So, this I keep getting back to this. You put 3 inches of height on Bryce Young.
Oh, yeah.
A, the Bears don't trade the pick.
Yeah.
And B, the contract's already signed.
Yeah.
The only reason we're having this debate is because he's 5'10", and he's probably 185 pounds.
Yeah.
That's why we're having the debate. There's no debate if we're talking about the ability to play the position.